Malte Grunert is a producer, and Volker Bertelmann is the Oscar-nominated composer for All Quiet on the Western Front, Germany's submission for Best International Feature at the 95th Academy Awards. It's streaming on Netflix right now. It's so great, you guys. I'm Denton Davidson for Gold Derby, and Malte, I'll start with you. When we think back on All Quiet on the Western Front, of course, we think of the classic novel. We think of the classic 1930 American film, both tall orders, but you went for it anyway and you nailed it. So, like, as a producer, what made you want to get involved in this project and retell it in this German form?
Well, sort of, the novel had always been important to me. It's been, and that is true for almost everybody that worked on this film. I mean, it's true for the director Edward Berger. It's true for most of our cast. And like them, I had read the novel when I was in my teens, possibly in school, and then again in my 20s. And so it was always an iconic book. And when the possibility presented itself to go to have access to the rights and do it again, it felt like a German language adaptation of the best-selling German language novel of all times, which the book is, felt like almost like a blind spot. Sort of, it's like, sort of, why didn't anybody ever do this? And there are a number of reasons. I mean, the 1930s film is fantastic and a masterpiece, and that is intimidating. But also, the other thing is that obviously, from a German perspective, the sort of guilt, shame, responsibility connected to World War II is sometimes overshadowing looking at World War I. But it felt a really relevant story. It felt there's a direct connection between the two world wars, and the end of World War I sort of leads into the rise of fascism in Germany pretty much directly. And the other thing why it felt really relevant is that we do live in a time where right-wing nationalist propaganda is on the rise. There are right-wing parties in parliament all over Europe, Hungary, Poland. There's a strong right-wing faction in France, the Netherlands. There are German neo-Nazis. And All Quiet on the Western Front is a story about a few young men who, fueled by nationalist propaganda, enlist and go into war as if it was an adventure. And to remind ourselves that war is not an adventure, and war is ultimately just death and destruction and pain, felt like a relevant thing to revisit.
And just to follow up on the fact that you're representing Germany for Best International Feature at the Oscars this year, what does that feel like for you, just to be that representation this year?
Oh, I mean, sort of, it's fantastic. I mean, sort of, it is. I produced a film called Land of Mine a few years ago, which was a Danish submission to the Oscars, sort of some years ago. But to now do that with a German language film and a German film and such an iconic German novel is, yeah, I mean, sort of, it does me very, very proud, and I'm hoping that the film stands up to that.
And Volker, this is your fifth collaboration with director Edward Berger, so you two must have a pretty comfortable relationship at this point, I would imagine. Does he pretty much just hand over music responsibility to you at this point, or does he have very strong direction that he wants you to follow?
Well, it's not always. It's always a process that is not like automatically easy, And I think that's a good relationship, a work relationship in the creative world is actually, fueled by, by challenging each other. And so when I received from Edward the first comments about music, he said to me, please, can you do something very extraordinary that you've never done before? And which is, of course, something when you hear that, you're like, you're sweating, and but at the same time, I think that's necessary, because otherwise you sit at home and you're like, I switch on the synthesizer and I make a few sounds, and then that's fine, that will work. And so I while he said that, he was really grabbing me and saying, please concentrate yourself and go back home and think about it. And so I went back home, and I was already, when I saw it the first time, Edward and me, we saw it in Berlin together. And then, I went back home, and on the way back home, I actually had already I would say the raw elements in my head, because I was thinking I need a very small fragmented melody that I can use in small sections. Even in the war areas, I can actually throw it in as a kind of, like a fragment that comes in and goes out, so that it's not too long. And the other thing was that I wanted to use an instrument from that time. That were the two thoughts that I had. And I went back home and I found an instrument from that time, which was the harmonium from my grandmother that was sitting in my studio. And here we go. I just recorded the first 3 notes and sent them to Edward. And I was very happy that he reacted very positively. And he said, it sounds like Led Zeppelin. Please go on, please move on. And so every time we were talking about the film, about scenes, he always said, let's do the Led Zeppelin here in that area as well, and let's do the Led Zeppelin there. And it was a little bit like it was nice to have to work with music in that kind of enthusiastic way, that you feel like let's put that here in, and there is a space here for this kind of motive. So I was very thrilled.
When you talk about it, is it the dun dun dun?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So you see, you can sing it.
So that's a harmonium. Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to ask about that because it changes. We kind of first hear that towards the beginning, but not right away. But what I found interesting about it is it comes in when the caskets are coming out at the beginning, and then we see it while the women are washing clothes and sewing. And I thought, wow, that really changes what you think when you're watching a movie. I mean, that's the power of music, because women sewing and washing clothes to flutes would have looked like a completely different scene. So when you watch it that first time, are you watching it in silence, or is there like stand-in music, or what is that experience like?
Well, there was temp music, but in a way the music was not really precise in the way that I could sense what it wanted to be, but there was never it was never leading me in copying it or something like that, which sometimes is happening. You just hear a piece and it's very concrete and you're like, oh, I have to beat that. That's very difficult, But in this case, it was just like something, there was just a kind of texture. And I have to say, this opening sequence, I think that was the one that inspired me in a way for the whole film, because it had a little bit the appeal of an art film, like it could have going on like that. I mean, you could have told the whole film without talking, but you totally knew what it was. So when I saw this first sequence and I heard the sewing machines, I had the feeling, oh, it would be great if the sewing machines are a part of the music and they are creating this kind of crescendo. And Edward always said, yeah, we want to have more. The more we see of the factory, and let's say it makes the whole war appear like an operation without any humanity. You just even though you see the very beautifully shot pictures, the whole machine in the background runs and has no there is no no warm feeling in the end about it. So while I was looking at the harmonium, I tried to find a motive that is working with all these other sounds that are joining. And it reminded me of old silent movies in a way, silent movies not with actors, like silent movies where you just see a city that, structures, architecture, like abstraction of like abstract films, and I loved it. I loved it.
And Malte, can you talk a bit about the team you had here? Because you mentioned Edward Berger, the director. We've got Volker, who composed the music, but the ensemble of actors is incredible. I just spoke with Daniel and Felix, and they're just two of them. And then you have all these technical achievements, sound effects. I mean, the cinematography. It just goes on and on. What was it like to bring all of that together? And then what is it like what was it like for you to see the finished product for the first time on screen? What was that feeling like?
I think we managed to put together a really exceptionally gifted crew and cast for All Quiet on the Western Front. I mean, sort of our costume designer Lizzie Crystal is amazing, and if you look at and just the feat of organizing a war film like this with sort of thousands and thousands of uniforms, which were manufactured for us in different sort of stages of decay through different seasons, with sort of ice on them, or Heike Merker, our makeup artist, who's receiving the European Film Award next weekend for her work on the film, and just the different textures and colors of mud, and making sort of the cold sort of visible in the cast is amazing. Sort of the production designer, sort of we had a huge set. We started digging trenches 5 months before we started principal photography, and dressing them. It's sort of and obviously the cast, Felix in his first role, who I had seen on stage before, thanks to my wife, who hired him out of drama school, sort of to the theater in Vienna, and then told me I needed to come and see this young actor. And she and
is that how you found Felix?
That's how we found Felix. Yes, my wife saw him in drama school as sort of and suggested him as a member of the ensemble of the State Theater in Vienna, because she was part of the artistic sort of leadership team there at the time, and then Albrecht Schuch as Kat, and Daniel, who's a partner in our company, Amusement Park, but also a friend, and the rest of the cast, everybody was just drawn to the material. It's an iconic novel, and like I had this sort of epiphany when sort of I thought the rights became available, and I thought a German language adaptation of All Quiet on the Western Front, that's like a blind spot. Why didn't anybody ever do this? And I think everybody felt the same. And we were extremely lucky in being able to attract top talent behind and in front of the camera. And I think it was due to the sort of, to the novel being such an iconic piece of literature, and the chance everybody understood we were given by doing a first German language version. And production was obviously, it was very tough, right? It was the height of the epidemic, sort of travel bans, borders closed, extreme restrictions on set, plus all this all these extras and everything. So it was really quite a feat. And then seeing a first cut afterwards, and after all this sort of all the hard work, and then thinking, I think it worked. I think we managed to pull it off, is sort of, first, it's probably a huge relief because that doesn't always happen. But so it's a relief and pride in the achievement that sort of we all sort of everything that we achieved as a team. And yeah, I mean, sort of it made me very happy.
And Volker, I'm always curious to ask musicians, when did you know you had a musical gift? And would you call it a gift, or did you just study hard enough to become that good? Because I feel like you have to have some sort of gift. I don't feel like I could come up with a composition no matter how hard I tried, and how hard I studied. So what's your opinion about that? And when did you begin composing music?
Well, I have to say my initial contact with, wanting to make own music was when I was 9 years old. And I remember still the day when I asked my mom. I was sitting next to her in the church, and I heard a piano player playing a piece of Chopin. And I was so moved and touched by that piece that I said to my mom, I want to have lessons with this guy. I want to learn exactly that piece that I heard. And she said, yeah, but we don't have a piano. And I said, yeah, but I need to have piano lessons. So we were trying to find a way, and at that time we had not a lot of money. So that my grand aunt, who was very musical, she had also a harmonium, she had a piano. She had one leftover piano, and she just said to us, I can borrow you my one leftover piano. So they brought the piano over, and I started to write. And I remember 3 years later, on my grandmother's birthday, no, it was actually on Christmas, I wrote a piece. Her name was Alma. So I wrote a piece that was called To Alma. That was my first written piece. That was when I was 12.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Malte, when did you know you wanted to get into film? Was there a movie that you saw when you were younger that really impacted you, that you thought, oh wow, I want to do that when I'm older? Or what brought you into the film industry?
I mean, yes, I was just always, it was when I started watching films, obviously, I sort of, it wasn't in the context of that's what I want to do, because, sort of, I had no clue of, how this would be done, what the process would be. But I've always been, I always loved films. I always, since I was a kid, and so my process, I didn't go to film school. I didn't study it. Sort of, when I went to university, and I just started working in films. Odd jobs in production, whatever, as a driver, as an assistant of some sorts, and just sort of continued to do that all through my university years. And by the end, I actually went to law school. And by the end of law school, I knew I'm definitely not going to be a lawyer. And I don't want to practice law, or sort of, it's very helpful, and I don't mind having studied it, but I then immediately made the switch and started doing sort of small documentaries first, and basically went through my own personal film school, from, small documentaries to sort of, smaller TV shows, and eventually onto film.
Well, it sounds like both of you made the right choices and landed on the right path. Congratulations on this film, All Quiet on the Western Front. It's streaming right now on Netflix. Everyone go watch it if you haven't already. And best of luck to both of you at the upcoming Oscars and all of the other award shows coming up. And thanks for speaking with Gold Derby today.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. Much appreciated. Thank you.